Gresha folded Borbuk's arms up to his shoulders. "Rest well now, brother," she whispered. She has seen too many of her clanfolk die this day, and while death in battle was the preferable way to go for an orc, this was an excess. It had been some time, though, since she had seen any of the enemy, so she had taken it upon herself to offer the final farewell to those that she could. She had just finished Borbuk's rites when an unholy racket erupted from her right, and she spun just in time to see a lone human warrior stumble out of a thicket. He'd obviously gotten turned around somewhere. He was panting hard, and she had a somewhat perplexed look on his face. His armor was splattered all over with bright crimson blood. Whether it was her or his kin, or a mixture of both, was anyone's guess. There was also a healthy mixture of thistles and thorns that had hitchhiked their way out of the brush stuck to his surcoat. In his right hand was clutched a rather fine longsword, so Gresha leapt to her feet and took up a defensive pose. "Come then, let us shatter our steel," she challenged the interloper. He stared at her for a moment, allowing his breath to slow. The grip in his blade loosened a little. "No." "What?" she roared. "I said no," the human said flatly. Gresha was incensed. "Raise your sword, you coward!" "Against who?" the human snarled. "A dead chief? For who? A dead captain?" He simply tossed his blade into the mud. "No. It's already finished, and I am done." "Done?" She was apoplectic. "Done with what?" "Done with all of it. With the killing. With the fighting. So you do what you need to, orc. I'll have no part in this anymore." Gresha had difficulty processing this. While she should cut him down where he stood, killing an unarmed opponent was wholly dishonorable. So while she was trying to rectify the situation, playing out in front of her, in her mind, the human tossed his hands in the air and stormed back through the thicket from whence he had come. And so, a very bewildered Gresha was left holding a guard stance against a non-existent enemy. Jeren watched as flames danced over the skin of his upcoming meal. Finding a live pheasant had been a bright spot in this otherwise dismal day. He offered a minor thanks to the gods that some of the nobility were such pampered pansies. The sound of muffled footsteps behind him captured his attention. Instinctively, his hand moved for his sword, which at that moment he was really wishing that he hadn't thrown in the mud. He wasn't fully disarmed, he still had a knife, but it was a paltry cooking utensil, not of much use against a well-armed foe. Combined with the fact that he was currently seated, and in just the right spot to be ambushed, his odds of survival had sunk through the floor, and so he resigned himself that this probably would be the end. Shame he didn't even get to taste the bird. There was a sound of metal hitting earth. "Scavengers will be upon the field soon. You are unwise to be disarmed," a familiar voice called out. Jeren turned to see the same orc from earlier. She had tossed his sword in his general direction, while she remained by the edge of the light cast by the fire. Gresha had done what she set out to do. She returned the man's weapon. Really, she should leave, head back to the clans. But the chill of the night was beginning to creep in, and the flame seemed warm and enticing. Travelling in darkness would be treacherous at best, and the beasts that were drawn in by fighting were vicious in nature. There was safety in numbers, and 2 was better than 1. But the other was her enemy, or at one point today had been. Her mind was fighting itself about what was the right course of action, so naturally she just stood there awkwardly, not doing much of anything. Jeren sighed. This display of social ineptitude was making him uncomfortable. The orc had offered a hand in peace, so he'd do the same. "Bird's almost done." "Huh?" Gresha asked. "One of the knights was a snobbish prick. Would only eat fresh game fowl," he said, as he pointed to the corpse of a bird, roasting on a spit. "This wily bastard survived, so I cooked it for dinner. You want a plate?" Gresha's mouth watered at the thought. She had had nothing but hardtack for rations for weeks, and the prospect of fresh poultry made her inch closer. But her honour was stronger than her hunger. "I have no recompense for a meal. I can't find myself indebted to an enemy, and a human one at that." "You brought back my blade. "We can call it for services rendered," he said, as he carved into the bird, placing not a small amount of meat on a well-polished buckler. He then set it down on the bog, a healthy distance away from himself. "You do what you want. Is there if you change your mind?" That was fine then. If he wanted to call it fair for returning his sword, so be it. She approached the log, retrieving the steel from the dirt. She hesitantly held out the hilt towards him, and as he took it, she half expected him to simply run her through with it, but he just drove the tip hard into the ground. It seemed as though the words he spoke earlier had been truthful. He was done with killing. So she picked up the buckler and sat, just out of arm's reach, on the battle-felled tree. The man nodded. "Jeren," he offered. "Gresha," she replied. The pair ate in silence, the popping of dried wood being the only thing breaking the stillness. Even after the meal had been finished, they didn't dare speak. What would two adversaries even discuss? It was Gresha who would inevitably break the uncomfortable quiet. "They'll probably kill us for this, you know." Jeren glanced out into the darkness. He couldn't see anything, not that he would have wanted to anyway. They both knew what lay beyond the small threshold of light. Mountains of bodies that would never be buried. "I don't think we have to worry about that. I suspect we may be the only ones left." Another lull in the conversation followed, and they sat noiselessly, staring at the fire. It seemed that while Jeren was perfectly amenable to sitting in silent serenity, Gresha was not. How are we going to explain this? Who will we say triumphed here today?" she asked, as she gestured around. "What if we don't?" Jeren retorted. Gresha turned to him. "What?" "What if we just fucked off?" he explained. "What if we just let both sides think that they lost? Let them tuck tail and run, lick their wounds for a while. They may commit to defense, expecting an attack. Maybe there would even be a moment of peace, however brief." This notion was surprisingly appealing to her. She had been fighting for so long, and she, much like Jeren, was tired of it all. She just hadn't realized it. It was a fine notion, respite for everyone else, and all she had to do was disappear. Not that she had any kin to speak of, and most of her friends had been slaughtered this day. There were no ties that bound her to anything, really. She could even make a tranquil little slice of heaven for herself, without war or violence. But this, in itself, would come with complications. She had to figure out if this human had some sort of angle. "It's a nice thought, but where would you go?" Jeren shrugged. "Maybe head to Abor Amatis, or even Mount Karash. Somewhere out near the ocean, far away from here." That would be a strange decision. Mercenaries weren't welcome in the Eastleigh States, and what does a soldier do but soldier? So she pressed a little further. "I heard they're not fond of sellswords that far to the east." "They aren't," Jeren replied, as he slid off the log into the dirt, propping his back up against the oak wood. He just stared at the fire, letting the crackling of dry wood fill the air as he searched for the right words. I wasn't always an armsman," he sighed. "My father was a shipwright, had me apprenticing for it before—" The sentence trailed off. No further elaboration was needed. Before seemed like a whole other life ago, a memory that was just out of reach. It didn't even feel real anymore. A strange, sad sort of smile broke on his face. "I think I remember enough to make a go of it, though." This posed a problem for Gresha. She was a warrior through and through. She knew nothing else. Orc mercenaries only got hired by other orc clans. That meant going back, and that meant breaking a bond. And Gresha was not in the habit of doing so. So, in an act of reckless bravery, or more likely desperation, she hesitantly asked, Do you think I could go with you? Maybe you could teach me your craft." The human sat silent for a moment, then let out a short chuckle. "Fuck it, sure. Why not?"